Well, hello everyone. Thank you once again for joining us here at Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show, hanging out with Jason Obju. Jason, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, Clifton. How are you?
I am doing very well. So I'm actually joining in today live from Johnstone Supply headquarters out here in Portland, Oregon. Oh man, what an interesting part of the country. I had not been out here before, and people are craving to learn about these topics all over the country, all over the world. And it's important to talk about these because we had a very important topic we actually are going to be talking about today that I have been doing for the last 2 days out here at Johnstone Supplies, helping everyone prepare and trying to spread the word about the way that our industry is changing and adapting at like lightning speed. And for those of you out there that don't know, Jason is the backbone behind interpreting documents that most of us will probably never even open. And things like the technology transition rule, which is what we're going to be diving into today and learning about. So, Jason, I think it's a good time to do a little refresher for any of those joining that don't know exactly where this stuff comes from.
Yeah, we can get into that. First off, again, this wasn't a decision that was made by one manufacturer, whether it be an equipment manufacturer or a refrigerant manufacturer. It wasn't because patents ran out or any of that. It was actually a federal piece of legislation that passed through Senate, through Congress, signed by a president. It was the AIM Act, and it directed the EPA to achieve certain goals, and they had deadlines to achieve these goals. The overall goal was to reduce the amount of HFCs that we're using in the market. It's not a phase out, but a phase down. It was an 85% phase down over, say, 35 years. Or by 2035, I'm sorry. It started back in 2022 with a 10% reduction, and we have
big deal.
An additional 30% on top of that. So for a total of 40%, January 1, 2024.
Like a couple months. People don't realize how fast this is coming. Look, a little over a month and a half. Oh, my goodness.
And there have been subsequent rulings that have come out because, again, there are numerous goals that are stated in this AIM Act under sections and subsections.
Sure.
And this technology transition rule that we discussed today, there was a proposed rule put out like a year ago that said, here, this is what we're thinking.
Right.
And they finally published a final rule that says, well, here is what it is. And it's going to touch every portion of our industry. Refrigeration, right, industrial, commercial, residential, comfort cooling, industrial process refrigerant. It's going to touch all of the sectors and subsectors of our industry. So not only do we have a reduction in the amount of HFCs that are allowed to be on the market, as we can see on screen here, we're also going to see restrictions on the new equipment that's allowed to be put into commerce, depending on the sector. Right.
Right. And a lot of people are a little confused about this whole HFC phase down. And one of the things I pointed out earlier today, and it really helped people understand that, is it's not going to change. A lot of people look at it and go, oh, the EPA could change this if they want to.
Yeah, this isn't going to take, right?
It's not. It's coming from two different directions. So it started out in the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol that was during the Obama administration, did not get signed during the Obama administration, moved over to the Trump administration, did not get signed in the Trump administration, made its way to Biden administration and got signed by President Biden. But in the middle of that, there were people that went, man, this is not moving fast enough. So let's just copy all this and throw it in the AIM Act.
Right.
President Trump signed it. And so not only do we have the AIM Act, we have the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. So we have a congressional act, an act of Congress, as well as a international treaty, both saying the same thing. HFCs, you're on your way out. By manufactured based on global warming potential in a big way. We always talk about that. R22, prices R22 went skyrocket because of the demand, and the supply went down, demand went up, prices went up, so we got rid of it. 410A, seen prices R410A go up last year, 404, 134. They're HFCs. They hit that 10% January 2022. So what's going to happen January 2024? Well, we can anticipate,
right? A bit more, right?
A bit more. So then it goes even further. So two things you're not going to change. An act of Congress, hard telling how many administrations it would take for that to happen. International treaties, we're not going to go to the rest of the world and go, we really don't like what we said we'd do.
Yeah, we're out.
Yeah, we're just going to do our own thing. Well, those two are mandating the refrigerant itself, and then that whole technology transition.
Right. So the issue there was the the initial AIM Act, as you said, brought the phase down on the refrigerant side of things, but we were still turning out equipment.
Yes.
So there's going to be a big problem if we're no longer making the refrigerant, but we're still selling the equipment. We're creating a shortage.
Right.
So this technology transition rule is now starting to bring the equipment down so that, again, there's an end in sight here. There's a light at the end of the tunnel where we are no longer going to be making this high GWP equipment with no refrigerant to service it with.
Exactly. So what do those numbers look like for GWPs? It's pretty clear. All of our HFCs, it's been high global warming potential. So when we talk about these lower GWP refrigerants, like say even that 1234YF, if I've got a GWP of less than 1 on 1234YF, and I got a GWP of 2088 with 410A, that means a refrigerant manufacturer can make 2088 pounds of
YF,
that 1 pound of R410A. So, I mean, it just makes matter sense. And so then the manufacturers are going, wait, we got to have surface gas go along with this stuff for time frame too. And so let's look at how this all comes together. And the technology transition rule went,
Go back to that one real quick, Clifton. I want to point something out. So those numbers on the bottom, they actually mean something. They're not just numbers assigned by the EPA or by somebody so GWP is based off of CO2 being 1. So when you see that 2088 under 410A, what that means is when released to the atmosphere, 410A will trap 2088 times as much heat as CO2 by itself.
Right.
All right, 4048, 3,920 times as much heat as CO2 by itself. So these are extremely high numbers. So there's a real meaning to those numbers.
Yeah, and that's the part that I really appreciate you explaining, because it took me a little time to understand that. I mean, we always talk about ODP, ozone depleting potential, and we'll hear GWP. What does it really mean? Well, that's exactly what it means. Global warming potential means it's a greenhouse gas. It traps heat inside of our planet. And so not only do we need to get our GWP down, we have to be able to look at the refrigerants that's going into the equipment and understand that it's all based on the GWP. It's a balancing act of, okay, we got to make reductions. We're going to base it on GWP. What refrigerants can we work with? So that's where the SNAP policy comes into play. It says, okay, if we're going to get rid of a refrigerant, what refrigerants will work with that? And then we have to go to our manufacturers and we have to go through ASHRAE. We have to test different refrigerants. Go, okay, so now let's find the best options. Let's implement them as well as we can. And now let's start making some changes. So we're going to see all of our common refrigerants. I keep reproducing these slides because it's important to know. These are the ones that we are comfortable with, right? These are our R410A, 404. This is our It's a lot of our refrigerants that we've gotten used to over the years, but they have high global warming potential values to them.
I want to pause you right there, Clifton. This slide that you put, and you always show, the way that this phase down is being done, it's not going to affect all HFCs equally.
No.
All right. It's like a bank account where the EPA gives each manufacturer an allotment. So they have this much in their account, so to speak. And each tank of refrigerant that they make, again, that allotment is based on GWP. And each tank that they produce pulls from that bank account. So if you're making a lot of refrigerants, tanks of refrigerants that are high GWP, you're going to draw down your allotment really fast.
Total allowance.
Right. So manufacturers are going to choose which refrigerants they want to make and which ones they don't. Again, based on their allotment, they'll say, listen, R32 has a GWP of 676. 410A has a GWP of 2088. I can make 4 tanks of this or 24. So again, it's going to be up to them to pick and choose. So again, we'll see this affect higher GWP refrigerants more than we will the lower GWP refrigerants in the HFC side.
Exactly. So from the manufacturing side, we already know that our manufacturers were looking at these refrigerants going, okay, we know that we had to make transitions. Let's look at the available refrigerants. Let's look at their GWP values. And so that everyone understands these different refrigerants we're talking about, even our what we call new refrigerants like R32 and 454B, they're kind of remakes on existing chemicals we've already
R32's been out. They may be new to us, but they're not new to the industry by any means. They've been out there for decades.
Exactly. There are times where I ring this bell that HFCs are being phased down and people go, well, isn't HFC 32 on that list? And well, Yeah, it is, but it has such a less GWP than R410A. We can use it for a longer period of time. If we make the transition into the equipment sooner, we have more length of time that we can continue to use, or more amounts of equipment in that amount of time. I should phrase it that way. So, 32's been around. R410A is a blend. It had half of it was 32, 50% was 32, 50% was 125. That was the flame deterrent that took it from an A2L to an A1. And then we're going to see with 454B, we're going to see R32 blended with that 1234YF, that very low GWP refrigerant. And that's what we're going to see. Those are going to be our two primary options. We knew that. We've been talking about this for a while. We're going to see that in equipment. It's all built off from our SNAP policy. SNAP dictates what chemicals are going to work as replacements for others.
And in what applications, right?
Yeah,
so they're very
exactly.
specific. They will say, listen, this refrigerant is approved for use in this application. It doesn't mean you can use it anywhere. It means you can use it in this application under these circumstances.
It's very specific. So the manufacturers are utilizing these like SNAP summary policies to be able to look at what refrigerant are we able to use. And then you have ASHRAE testing the refrigerants so we can make sure that they're safe for different applications. So Jason is constantly putting out like the SNAP 26 summary. As soon as it came to public, Jason's like, let's throw it together and let's get it out to the industry. Let's talk about it. We've had some changes. All right, here we got some new limits, particularly when we start talking about like R290, equipment that's going to be going into.
If you look at this proposal, almost all of the refrigerants in this proposal are flammable on one side. Either they're mildly flammable 2Ls or they're highly flammable A3s.
Exactly. So that leads us into what this conversation today is about. We knew that we were going to be changing chemicals. Our manufacturers knew that we were going to be changing chemicals. What happened that it didn't really catch us off guard, but it made us rethink the manufacturing perspective a little bit closer.
Before we get into this, I just want to, we're not sounding the death knell for our industry, all right?
No.
A lot of these regulations do not apply to how much reclaimed refrigerant we can put back on the market, all right? Each manufacturer is allotted X amount of pounds, carbon pounds, GWP pounds, however you want to put them for virgin refrigerant. However, if we recover and bring in for reclamation 10 million pounds of 410A, we can put that 10 million pounds of 410A right back on the market. So in order to avoid this shortage, in order to avoid any kind of scare, so to speak, it behooves us to recover this refrigerant, bring it in for reclamation, and get it back on the market. That's the way we keep the price down and keep availability high. Reclamation, recovery, key. Reclamation. Yes, that is a huge part of it.
Yeah, because we're talking about new refrigerants, right? So we have a supply out there. If we can get that supply of used refrigerant back in for reclamation, it's not based on those manufacturers.
Right, there's no phase down on reclamation.
Yeah.
There's no limit to how much reclaimed refrigerant we can put back on the market. If we keep bringing it back, we can keep it in the cycle, in the economy, so to speak, that much longer. So it behooves us, and it's to our advantage to recover, reclaim, and get this refrigerant back on the market. It will keep availability up and prices down. We control our own future.
Absolutely, we do. So the thing that we have seen now that goes along with the actual refrigerant and the GWPs of refrigerant, we've given the EPA some, I would consider, additional authority. And in two different things that has happened here. So with the AIM Act, we give the EPA opportunities to help guide, and the EPA wants to gather information. And later in the program, we're going to give you a link to a window of time that you can give some input to the EPA on ways that we can discuss training of these new refrigerants properly. But what has happened with the AIM Act and the EPA is that the EPA is now able to relook at the equipment itself and go, okay, so we've talked about the refrigerants that can be used, but now let's talk about the GWP limits that can be put on equipment. So it started out with a proposal. It had a window of opportunity for the industry to voice some of its opinion. And the EPA, in that proposal, they were stating that we really need to make sure that the equipment has limitations of the global warming potential of the gas.
We can't phase the refrigerant down and keep producing equipment that runs on that refrigerant. We're going to artificially create our own shortage. We have to taper both. Right.
Yeah, because we can't take all of our service gas, clean it up, and put it back into new equipment and not have
and then nothing's left to charge it. Right. So what this does is eliminate the manufacturer from the competition for what gas is left. Manufacturers are going to be using different refrigerants and new equipment, and that frees up all of that refrigerant to move over to the service side.
And so we want to make sure, hopefully, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, is we're here to talk about this. And so that people don't freak out and go, man, that EPA, they just make it harder on everybody, don't they? Well, no, they're trying to make it easier. So what you're showing
right now, Clifton, is the proposed rule that was put out last year. And this is what it looked like. It was a restriction for new equipment based on a subsector. And this is just one portion of it. There was actually 3 or 4 pages of this chart with various different subsectors and sectors. And it assigned a GWP limit, a proposed GWP limit for that sector, and a date for which the equipment had to be in compliance.
Compliance. Mm-hmm.
Right. So then the newer rule came out, and it looked a little bit different, and it did catch some of us off guard.
That's really why we're here today. So that new rule came through. We were kind of anticipating that it would just be voted as
similar
proposed, but it came out a little bit differently. And we're here to help clarify that for you and with you today. And I've seen quite a few people tell us where they're joining in from. Please let us know. Love to hear from you. This is a whole community. You're a part of this with us, and we want to know where you're at. All right, so let's look at this. This is what happened. Remember, on that original proposal, it was kind of like a blanket of different types of systems or products. But what happened?
Sectors and subsectors, right? All equipment that fitted into that one category.
Yeah. All right. So what came out of it was we actually are going to break this down based on 2 different classifications, I guess I would call them.
Yeah.
One is going to be called a system. And so let's define what a system would look like, Jason.
Systems are, as an installer, you have to complete the circuit in the field. You have to charge it. You're assembling. So think of a split system, a multi-component system that you, as the installing technician contractor, you have to assemble it, build it up in the field.
Site constructed.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then field charged.
Yeah. Indoor unit, outdoor unit, line set, additional refrigerant based on length of my line set.
Other components, right? Refrigeration stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I get that. That makes complete sense to me that would be called a system. And then we have the other classification is going to be called a product.
Now, a product is something that is ready to operate when it leaves the factory. It's all piped, it's all charged. You basically wire it up, plug it in, and it's a go. So the refrigeration circuit is complete when it leaves the factory. Think package systems, window units, package units, smaller PTAC heat pumps, those sorts of things.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so now we have some direction. We have 2 different product types to look at. Systems, we have products. Okay, now this is where it starts getting tricky. We do have one thing that's going to be added. We're going to see new labels added to equipment that we have not encountered in the past. So the EPA is going to require that these products and components that have HFCs in them are labeled, that they have. Remember, we've been using HFCs for a long time. We never had a label on them. Right now we're going to, just like the R290, the flammable product, the highly flammable equipment will have highly flammable equipment labels on them. We're going to have labels on our HFC refrigerants, and it's going to have a little bit of information on them. It's probably going to have some GWP. It's going to say what refrigerant is actually in that system.
How much
came from the factory. So we're definitely going to see these on our new products, right?
So it's going to be labeled, this contains an HFC, and there may be a code there that you see that can be scanned to help track it. So we can see where it's moving around the country, those sorts of things. Again, this is to help EPA track things and understand market. Right. They want to understand the market too.
Right. So that requirement will go into effect the calendar year 2025. So that's really not very long. We're only talking a little over a year. We're going to be implementing this with our new equipment. Now, let's get into the nitty gritty, because I think we could probably spend an entire show in the nitty gritty here.
So right off the bat, I don't want to confuse anyone. If I'm going too fast or if I'm saying things that you're not understanding, please chime in the chat. Say, hey, whoa, that went over my head, and I will stop.
Yeah, because we've really only got 4 slides left on this whole deck.
And there's a lot to dive into. So in the proposed rule that we put up earlier, you've seen a lot of the compliance dates were January 1, 2025. There were some 2026s in there, but in the finalized rule, some of these dates have been moved out to 2027 or 2028. That's one. Two, we are looking at a chart for products on this slide, which means that it's ready to go from the factory. These are your plug-in PTAC type things.
Yep.
There's two different charts now, one for systems and one for products. Now, for residential, light commercial, air conditioning, the numbers are the same. It's 700 GWP, January 1, 2025.
Either chart. Right.
But you'll see, instead of, if you read where it says global warming potential limit or prohibited substances, initially they were new. It is. And here's where things can get a little hairy. Initially, it was just a limit based on the GWP of the refrigerant. But in certain subsectors, they restricted a lot of HFCs from those subsectors, like commercial ice makers, package ice makers. They said, listen, not only is there a GWP limit, but here's a whole list of HFCs that you can't use in this application. So instead of just being a restriction based on GWP, there's also a lot of HFC restrictions from certain applications as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. Is it a product? Is it a system? If it is, what is the sector or subsector? Is it a freezer? Is it comfort cooling, industrial process? You'll see also that in the original ruling, they did it based on charge size for like your industrial process refrigerant, 200 pounds, less than 200 pounds. In this one, they moved it to the boiling point of the refrigerant in the evaporator. So for chillers and things, they did it again based on evaporating, boiling or evaporation temperature versus the charge size. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, exactly. You know, an interesting question just came in from Todd. And Todd, this is really going to be a tricky one to look at, right? There are some words in here that have to be validated a little bit clearer when it comes to a system. But if we look at our products are actually pretty clear. And so
current, let me read that again. It says current new equipment with 410A have manufacturers considered future retrofitting for these systems post-installation. As of now, there is no refrigerant that is EPA SNAP certified as a replacement refrigerant for 410A in existing 410A equipment.
Isn't that crazy? We have no service gas that is a replacement of R410A. We only have R410A for existing R410A.
And we're not used to that because when R22 happened, we had 17 SNAP approved substitutes for R22. All right. And now here comes 410A and there are 0 approved substitutes for 410A in these different applications. One of the reasons for that, again, is the GWP limit. All right. We do have limits on GWP and we have this phase down and there's a lot of things that go into play here. How much money can a company put into R&D to develop a product for equipment that is no longer being manufactured, but may have 10, 15-year lifespan on it? I do anticipate somebody coming out with a product that may be SNAP approved that does fit all of these, check all of the boxes to be put on the market, but
nothing at the minute.
At the moment, no. So what we're doing here is, again, if you look for new equipment, January 1, 2025, in a year and a month, the new equipment will no longer have 410A. All right. 410A has a GWP of 2088. It's got to be 700 or less. Right. So all of that refrigerant that we saw go into new equipment can now be moved over to the service side.
Okay.
You cannot retrofit 32 to 410. 32 is an A2L, 410 is an A1. And A2L refrigerants can only be used, even A3 refrigerants can only be used in systems designed for that refrigerant. All right. You cannot go backwards or forwards in your flame. If it's an A1 system, it needs an A1 refrigerant. If it's an A2L system, it needs an A2L refrigerant. The safety design components are not in place. All right. No. Systems that work with either a mildly flammable or a highly flammable refrigerant have all kinds of safety built in, again, based on UL standards, design safety standards. They've been tested under rigorous conditions to make sure that they're not going to cause a hazard. And older A1 equipment doesn't have any of that. So we're not going, we can create a really bad situation there.
Absolutely. Another great point that came in from Dan. We're also talking about performance of the system. we have a lot to think about as technicians and contractors going forward. And that's why we do these difficult conversations every week, right? We can only use the appropriate refrigerants that are designed, tested, and approved for those applications. So what it comes down to is the whole Kigali Amendment and the AIM Act set in place the manufacturing of new refrigerants. But the technology transition rule put
What we're looking
into
at here,
play this, put into, well, we're not going to say what refrigerants. In some places we will, but the main goal is to say that based on global warming potential, these are the limits that will go into new equipment with a compliance date in place.
X,
right there, manufacturer and import compliance date, which means they have to comply with this. So for the residential and light commercial, that's what I'm here in Portland today speaking to is, what are our residential contractors looking at? We have a lot of stuff. We could spend hours talking about this, and we'll dive into some of them. We're going to focus. Let's focus on primarily residential and light commercial, because it's very clear. It's the same on either chart, whether it's a product or
it's a deadline coming up really soon.
In
January 1, 2025, right? A year and 2 months. That is right on us.
So what this says in crayon version, remember, I like to draw in crayons. That's about as good as I can do. Don't give me watercolors. You won't get a reply out of me.
I'm not a Bob Ross here.
You'll get a mess. But in crayon version, I can tell you, in residential and light commercial systems, January 1st of 2025 will no longer be allowed to have R410A in them.
And we know, because this equipment is going to be on the market soon, that a majority of the equipment is going to use either 454B or R32, both of which are A2Ls.
Right. So now we're talking about making a very significant transition with equipment manufacturers that is going to restrict the refrigerants that can go into the system. So our manufacturers originally had to focus on, okay, the refrigerants are getting phased down. So now let's figure out how can we comply with the amount of products that we need to manufacture, what refrigerants are going to work best. And then the EPA technology transition rule comes through and says, and by the way, this has to be done and in place by January 1st of 2025 for these particular products, and it cannot have a GWP higher than 700. So
some of these GWPs are low enough where we're going to start to see some A3s in some of these applications as well. In your commercial refrigeration, your reach-in cooler, reach-in freezer, and your residential refrigerator, freezer, you're seeing A3 R290 refrigerant being deployed. Again, we saw earlier slide that it was like less than 3 GWP, so it fits the bill here.
So let's take a look real
now
quick.
We're looking at systems.
Let's take a look. So when we're talking about that difference, so we're back into stationary air conditioning, heat pumps. We can see that those are staying the same. But I wanted to kind of point out exactly what you were talking about, Jason. And I think I had one slide in here that covered it. We'll come back to that one. Let's go back to the very first one, because it touches on that a little bit with the commercial side of it. Let's take vending machines. Let's look at vending machines as well, right? A little bit out of the wheelhouse, but if you're in refrigeration, it's pretty common, right? So we'll talk about a Coke machine with a global warming potential limit starting January 1st of 2025 of 150 GWP.
There's not much that fits that.
What are we going to use?
You have YF.
Yeah, HFO.
All right. You have CO2, ammonia, and you have isobutane, propane.
HCs, hydrocarbons.
Yeah. I mean,
in the past, we would have had like 404 or 134A, depending on what temperature range you were working with. And we knew that we were phasing them out. We knew we had to come up with some solutions. But now we have, oh, by the way, your solution has to be here by January 1st of 2025. What's your solution? And so we have manufacturers.
So that's why some of those dates got pushed out
to
2027, 2028 to give the manufacturers time to develop systems and give SNAP time to approve refrigerants with GWPs less than that for those applications. So in the earlier proposal, we saw a lot of 2025s, and we didn't have SNAP approvals for certain refrigerants in certain applications yet. That's part of what SNAP 26 was. You can see Todd commented the A3 total charge was recently increased. That was in SNAP 26 so that we could see larger 290 charges in a lot of commercial applications, reaching coolers, reaching freezers, double door, those sorts of, up to a little over a pound.
I think I actually had that on one of our slides to show
Yeah,
what we
it was
did
SNAP
with that.
26, right?
SNAP 26 increased that amount. So we had the capability of working with different systems. Now, I will point out, I mean, it's not our
This is a proposed rule, right?
Exactly. And I do want to point out, just out of fun, because I did that today, that, automotive is not typically in our conversations, but it should be. We offer EPA 609. So we have our EPA 608. We have our 609 as well for automotive. But if we look at that, we've talked about this before. Actually, Todd and I have talked about this before, that, automotive started transitioning away from HFCs as early as 2012. The very first Cadillac CTS system with 1234YF came out in 2012. A lot of other manufacturers have moved along. My 2016 Ram truck has 1234YF, has that HFO. Automotive,
and that's an A2L.
And it's an A2L, it's one of our mildly flammable refrigerants.
Right.
Not highly flammable, and has almost no mitigation. But we'll talk about mitigation and the way that equipment is going to look differently. We might do that one here in the next couple of weeks, because there's a lot of things that we can cover on that one.
Yes. The other thing I want to point out is at ESCO, we try and bring you this was a 433-page document when it was released, and we're trying to summarize it in a way that breaks down the major points. Right.
Exactly.
There have been numerous rulings that have come out. There's been a proposed rule. There's another finalized rule from DOE. And I want to point out that at the conference, we're going to have Christian from the EPA. We're going to have people from the DOE, and you can hear directly from them about these rulings. And if you have specific questions that maybe Clifton or I can't answer, that hopefully they would be able to answer. So at the conference, again, we will have folks that are going to be talking about these rulings and anything that happens between now and then as well. There it is. Yeah.
So, we absolutely encourage you to join us. I mean, this is going to be a knockout year. We've got over 90 classes. We have a major general session that we're going to be talking about a little bit more. And we're going to have representatives directly from the EPA as well as the Department of Energy. We have all of these different aspects of the industry coming together to talk about these, because there's a lot of things. I mean, look at those automotive. It may not impact you directly unless you're in the automotive service sector, but they're going through the same pains that we are. Automotive for light duty passenger vehicles, model year 2025, not January 1st of 2025. Remember, a lot of our vehicles will produce the model year before the physical year.
That's next year.
Next year.
Yep.
That means the automotive industry, if they have not already transitioned and retooled to a lower GWP refrigerant, to like YF, that means they have to completely revamp their air conditioning line in months to be able to meet the 150 GWP by model year 2025. I'm sure glad they didn't do that in the residential light commercial HVAC industry.
So the chart that we're looking at here, again, is products, and the one, it's a light blue heading on the top, and the other chart that you showed was systems. And you can see, again, for what we're focusing on here, the conference is going to be awesome, is the residential light commercial comfort cooling. But know that this does touch on everything, every aspect. Again, we're only showing you a couple of the subsectors here, but there were 3 pages of products on charts and another 3 pages on systems, again, showing the restrictions on HFCs for certain applications. So on the chart that we're looking at here, we're just seeing a GWP limit, but in certain subsectors, that whole box is filled with like 15 or 20 HFCs that you're not allowed to use in that application.
I can get us there. I don't know how clear it's going to be. So hold on a minute. Let me get us over to that slide. And
there it is.
Yeah.
Well, all you got to see is some of them have just numbers.
Yeah.
150, 350, 300. And some of them have like 20 refrigerants listed in that box. What that means is those refrigerants, and they're all HFCs, most of them, cannot be used for that. So commercial ice makers, again, that's a big one. Ice cream makers, I'm trying to read it myself. Self-contained, like marine type things. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a product or a system. In a lot of these applications, there are not just GWP restrictions, but HFC restrictions outright.
Right. So if we think about like those commercial ice machines, typically we used R404 for commercial ice machines. This year, we've seen a lot of manufacturers take Manitowoc. I seen Manitowoc do a lot of their smaller commercial ice machines already went over to R290 because of the quantity of refrigerant that was restricted in their use. Remember, they had that limit on how much R290 can go into a product. But now we have a chart saying, yeah, you have a GWP limit, but also, by the way, you're not going to use 404 next year.
You're also not going to use 422A, 422B, 427C. Yeah, there's a huge restriction on a lot of the blends that we've seen, again, HFC style, and a lot of these applications. And it mainly is in the commercial refrigeration area, retail food, commercial ice machines, those sorts of things. But again, it was initially as a proposed rule, it was a GWP restriction. And now in the finalized rule, it is a GWP or limit potential prohibited substance. And you can see in here, there's quite a few applications that have more than just a GWP limit, that there's also refrigerant restrictions as well.
So what it comes down to is there's a lot of change that we have to spend time talking about together. There's a lot of things going on in this industry.
I have to stress here. One, from a training standpoint, you're going to have to get together with your training, whoever provides you training, hopefully ESCO. But there's a lot of training out there, some good, some not so good, to learn about these rules, to learn about the mildly flammable, highly flammable refrigerants, to get the safe handling, transportation, storage. Again, the refrigeration cycle is a refrigeration cycle. It doesn't change just because the refrigerant's flammable. And the other thing I would implore you to do is keep in contact with your supplier, your wholesaler, to know when these products are going to hit the market. Some are going to hit this year, and some are going to hit first quarter next year. And it's coming. When it depends on the manufacturer, depends on your state, when they update their building codes. Everyone's going to have to be up to date by January 1, 2025, or you're just not going to have air conditioning or refrigeration.
That's a weird thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was the reason we wanted to talk about this, is that how fast these transitions are happening and what you get to look forward to. So that very clearly defines what our current refrigerant options are in residential and light commercial systems. We currently are only going to have 2 refrigerants that really meet that bill. And that is going to be our R32 and our R454B.
Those are the 2 that the manufacturers are leaning toward now. Yes.
Exactly. Oh, Dan, I'm so glad you joined us today. Dan, I'm out here at corporate for Johnstone today doing some classes to help educate an industry, because we all have so much to do on these changes in a short period of time. So we have, not only do we have equipment that's coming out, we have to make sure that our tools and our service equipment is capable of working with these A2Ls and A3s and some equipment that you work with in commercial applications. So we come here every week to spend time to talk about the solutions and the changes. Remember, this just happened a couple of weeks ago. And so we're trying to clarify for you what that means, because we do get the questions of, well, yeah, I know we're going to these new refrigerants, but R410A is going to be around for a while, isn't it? And we have to clearly go, it depends on what you're talking about, because not in new equipment. No, right. It's going away in a year. And we go, whoa, is that what it says? And yeah, it absolutely says that.
So again, you need to, if you're teaching in a program, if you're a student in a program, your program's going to have to be updated to incorporate a lot of this information. Again, reach out to ESCO. We can help you get through that. If you're a contractor, if a technician, stay in contact with your supplier. You're going to need training. You're going to need to know, when is this equipment coming out?
Yeah, absolutely.
When am I anticipating coming to pick up a heat pump or a condenser that's got the A2L flammable sticker on the side?
Yeah.
Because it's coming.
Absolutely. You know, Bruce, that's a great question. So we kind of answered it earlier, but let's refresh on this. Yeah, absolutely. We have R32 and R454B as replacements of R410A in newly constructed equipment that also will have A2L mitigation built into it. If it is above, if it's R32, it's 4.1 pounds. If it's R454, it's 3.9 pounds. It'll have mitigation, which we'll cover in a separate topic here in the next couple of weeks. But there is no replacement service gas for R410A systems.
Other than 410A.
Other than R410A. That's it. You don't have the option, which means we must make these transitions to the refrigerants in the equipment so that we can have a better supply of service gas going forward. Because remember, we're on a big slippery slope. 10% reduction in HFCs based on global warming potential last year. January of 2024, we're adding an additional 30% to that, which means the supply of HFCs are going to continue to drop. Is the demand for new HVAC equipment going to drop? Not the way our world's repopulating.
so legacy equipment is going to need legacy gas. That's the only way to put it. As of now, there is no substitute. There is no drop-in. There is no retrofit for existing 410A equipment other than 410A. That may change sometime in the future. And if it does, again, we'll get on the show and we'll say, hey, look at what happened. But
here's where we are.
As of now, that is not the story. That is not the case.
No. So really what it comes down to is January 1st, 2025, all new residential equipment will either be R32 or 454B or a potential additional refrigerant that has a GWP less than 700, but we currently have not seen those refrigerants being
none of the manufacturers
released.
Have indicated they're using anything other than the two that we've highlighted here. If we do find that out, again, we would release that information to you.
Exactly.
As of now, they're all leaning toward one of these two.
And most of the manufacturers have discussed what refrigerant they're going with.
Right, they've announced it, right?
Yeah. Some manufacturers will actually use both refrigerants depending on what product line it is. So we know for sure of a manufacturer of equipment that will be utilizing R32 in a ductless line and R454 in a residential split system.
In a unitary,
line.
Right, yeah.
Unitary design. So, yeah, it's a slippery slope for all of us, but that's why we're here. We're here to talk about this stuff and make sure that we can clarify it for you and
answer questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we want you to. We want all of these questions to come in so we can help get through this together. This next 10 years, I would call it a decade of development for our industry.
It's going to be organized chaos.
Absolutely. We're going to be at the middle of it, directing you where you need to go. We're going to be like the direction patrol out in the middle of the street going, what are you looking for? You're working on a ductless system, R32. Yeah. Boom. Here you go. You're going this direction. Are you working on commercial refrigeration? Oh, by the way, you're heading over here to A3 training because we're going to see a lot of this.
I've been on the Safe Refrigerant Transition Task Force for AHRI. I sit on a lot of the codes and standards committees as an independent observer.
Yep.
So I do pick up a lot. A lot of it is not in what we would call English. A lot of it is legal speak or engineering speak. And it's my job to then take that and turn it into something that a student, an instructor, or a contractor or technician might understand.
Yes.
So we've been involved in this since the very beginning. We have tons of training material. We have an exam. We have online e-learning. And again, we're not the only source, but we are a credible source. All right. We've had team members that have been involved. The entire ESCO team has been all over this.
And you at the leading front of A2L and low GWP training. A lot of people don't realize we are starting to see more resources for low GWP and A2L training coming to the industry over the last few months. But we should never forget that ESCO has had this out for 2 years, trying to prepare an industry for everything that we're talking about. It's really not new to us. We're able to now validate it and clarify it for you. This has been on our radar for 2 years of these changes. And so we've been helping prepare. It's kind of the reason we started the show to go, okay, things are ramping up. We've been following this for 2 years. We want you here with us so that you could be the one staying ahead. Because if we think about change in general, think about any industry. Howard Weiss brings this up all the time. If we think about things like Kodak film, we think about things like Blockbuster video. When change happens to an industry, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to become prepared and you're going to excel and succeed, or you're not. And so the choice is yours. That's really about all the options you have. So here at ESCO, we make sure that we prepare you. We get you the resources to help you become the best that you possibly can. Because what happens when you get that first new box? What if you're a contractor and you go to pick up a new piece of equipment and it has a flammable
warning
label on the side of it, and you're installing the product and the homeowner walks by and sees that sticker and goes, "What are you selling me?" And you go, it's just a new flammable refrigerant piece of equipment. And they go, "I don't want that. I'm going to go contractor B because maybe they don't have a flammable." And you go, "Well, contractor B doesn't have it." That's not a conversation you want to have.
Same, right?
Yeah, you got
to prepare your staff, your technicians. When they go pick this up, they can't be shocked when they see a picture of a flame on the side. It says warning, flammable gas inside, only licensed or trained personnel. You look at that piece of equipment like, "Oh, that's not what I ordered." Oh, but it is what you ordered. And then you, again, as Clifton pointed out, need to be able to explain that to the end user, to the customer.
Absolutely. We don't want to learn about this.
Speaking on flammability.
Yeah, let's talk about flammability for a little bit.
So the technology transition rule that we've been discussing here today is a finalized rule. It will be published in the Federal Register in the coming days. Yes. There was also a proposed rule, and we will do a show on the proposed rule because there are a lot of moving parts in that proposed rule. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the things in this new proposed rule is the EPA is looking for comments, input, advice, suggestions from the HVAC industry at large on training. And from everyone that's in attendance here today.
Absolutely.
You can go on.
They're looking for input.
Yes, because this will be public. Yes.
We're talking about the government. We're talking about putting something in front of everybody. Be careful how you word your comments, and let's make sure it's for the good of the industry.
Use don't use certain sentence enhancers. What they're looking for again is comments, feedback, input, advice on technician training and certification, specifically as it applies to these new flammable, mildly or highly flammable refrigerants. It would be in a separate ruling, and they're looking for, one, do you think it's appropriate? Two, how would it be implemented? What are some ideas? Right. Again, this can't be done.
Like? We know what it looks like, don't we?
It can't be done under Section 608. A lot of folks say just add something to 608. 608 is an ozone depletion. All right. Yeah. When we're looking at this will be a separate program under the AIM Act, and subsection H directs EPA to ensure consumer and technician safety. And one of the ways that they're proposing to do this is through training and certification.
You mean through a recognized organization like the ESCO Institute and their low GWP training program?
I do.
Look at that. You would have thought we've been thinking about this.
But if you have ideas, if you think, again, there's no loopholes here. They're going to take all of this feedback and put it all together, and in a future ruling, we'll come out and say, this is what we're thinking. Yeah. So there is a link where you can go on and submit a comment. But again, in advance, I'm asking you, keep it clean, keep it professional, good ideas, good suggestions. We're not looking for you to go on there and say, this is BS, do away with all of this and fire yourselves. All right. That's not going to be, helpful to move the conversation forward.
Exactly.
We're looking for continuing education. Should we require technicians to take classes annually to stay up to date on things? Should we require it only for A2Ls or only for A3s? Again, there's a lot of moving parts here. So you can submit a comment. Do you have the link for that one, Clifton, for the EPA
I absolutely do. I'll move us over to the side, and we encourage you. That just opened today. This is how much we stay on top of our changing industry. If you haven't been diving into the Federal Registry and reading hundreds of pages of stuff every night and every weekend when you should have been out having fun fishing and hunting and exploring the world. When you're diving into information and dissecting it, this is what you get. You get first-hand information from the industry. So the EPA is looking for your professional input over the next 60 days.
Yes,
So
it is 60 days.
That's it. You got 2
And
months
just
to get
know
in on the
this.
action.
Your comment may be made public with your name attached. So,
Exactly.
as I said, keep it clean, keep it professional.
Right. But we all know that there's a disconnect in the level of education in our industry and the advancements of technology. We're not saying that we have an industry that is ill-educated. We're saying that we have an industry that has some things to learn about new technologies and new refrigerants and the safe handling of mildly flammable and highly flammable gases.
Right. And a
That's
lot of
the
folks
important-
haven't had that opportunity.
No.
All right. The option, they didn't know that it was out there, or they haven't had the resources to get that done. And we are here to give you those resources. All right. That's our job. That's what we strive to do.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we're here week after week after week. There's a lot of things we could be doing. You know, there's a lot of
Like you said,
projects to work on. Yeah.
So there is another rule that we will, again, there'll be a future show. It is a proposed rule. We will break down what that looks like. And again, you can comment on that proposed rule as well. But there are a lot of things in there moving forward. There's some major things in the proposed rule that we need to be aware of.
Yes.
And Clifton and I will do a show on that proposed rule. Remember, a proposed rule is not a final rule. There's a 60-day window for feedback. EPA goes back, reads the comments, goes through things, makes necessary changes, and then publishes it in the register as a final rule. So we will do a show on the proposed rule in the upcoming weeks. And again, we want you to come in and provide comment, and you can use that same link to provide commentary on the rest of the proposed rule when we break it down for you.
Fantastic.
And we will. That one is 540 something pages.
A little bit more to dissect through and some wording that needs to be clarified before we go out into the open world and go, did you know?
Right. I don't want to put out this is based again on my interpretation and the reading of the rule as it stands.
Yes.
There are certain things in these rules that may be gray areas that the EPA may have to clarify before publishing in the Federal Register, such as sell-through dates and import-export bans and those types of things. We're waiting for a publishing in the Federal Register before we comment on those. Right. But rest assured, there will be an end date for when you can, if you're stockpiling this equipment. We do know for that the package stuff that that window is 3 years after the date. So for what we call not the system, but the equipment or the self-contained, that the sell-through is 3 years for that. Exactly. From January 1, 2025. We will, once we get clarification on the systems, go over if and when there'll be a sell-through at all for the systems based on the GWP. So once I get clarification on that, we will put something out on that.
Yeah.
Because there's a few ways to interpret it again.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen some of those items that even the EPA that we would have anticipated would have been finalized will extend a little bit just to make sure that it is clarified before the final rule comes out.
So there's only one way to interpret it, and it's this way, right?
They're very good about clarifying things that are not as clear at the moment. And that's where they need our input. They need to talk about that. Because, we think about this. We've seen a few comments about, maybe we really do need to go back and learn about these refrigerants. And I personally believe an entire industry needs to relearn about these refrigerants because we didn't learn about them along the way. So now we have a lot to learn, and really in a short window of time. So we encourage you.
And there's a lot more resources available today than there were 5, 6, 10 years ago. Today, the resources that are available to technicians, to teachers, to students, to contractors, to anybody in the industry have multiplied infinitely. ESCO has a lot of those resources, but again, the internet has connected us in ways that we never thought possible.
Absolutely.
So take advantage of what's out there.
There's so much to learn from. Like, this is an e-learning program that you can, on your own time or your technician or your student's time. If we're an instructor and we want to make sure that our students are well prepared for the industry when they get there, but we don't know if we have enough time to change our curriculum. Maybe we've already set our class syllabus and we can't change things drastically. We don't have an extra 4 hours anywhere in the schedule to add something new, but we can go, but you know what? As part of your preparation for your EPA 608 that you'll be doing later
go through
in the
this
semester, why don't you look at this as the add-on component so you're prepared for the 608 and you're prepared for potential new certifications that could come along the way because you've already invested the time to become understanding of low
Ray
GWP.
made a comment here. It would be nice to get certified for the new refrigerant, just like 608. We do have a program. You're looking right at it. There's also a closed book exam that goes with it as well for these new refrigerants.
We have an entire resource for educators on this.
Right. If you're a technician and you're sitting in the van on the way to a service call, you can log in on your iPad or whatever and go through the e-learning course. There's a printed manual that you can read when you're fishing, I'll say. It's available in a variety of ways. And again, ESCO is not the only one that has material out there, but again, I prefer our material.
Well, yeah.
I'm just a little biased on that one.
Think about how far ahead we are on that. I mean, we got companies that are just now starting to put out materials, and we're going, welcome to the game. Glad you showed. So, but it's important.
We do webinars. We do a lot of training sessions. We've been to different supply houses. We're engaging the industry as best we can to try and bring awareness and put out all the fires, so to speak, the myths that are. So one of the things I get all the time, as soon as I start the class, they'll like, oh, R32, that's propane based, isn't it?
Right. And go, no.
Well, first of all, R32 is not a blend. It's a single compound refrigerant. It's got R32 in it, and that's it. 454B, again, no propane. It's R32 and 1234YF. So putting out little things like that to say, hey, listen, you're reading this on this site. If you're going to Google responsibly. All right. That's all that's the advice I'd have to give you.
Absolutely. Wow, that is some seriously good content in a short period of time. So let's give a couple minutes if anyone has any final questions or comments. I know it's a lot to digest, but that's what we're here for.
It is. And we do have things posted that you can go and kind of read the summary of the ruling that we covered today. And if you do have questions, you can email Clifton or I, email the show, email ESCO. Anybody will, one of us will get it and get back to you.
Yep, absolutely. Joseph,
that last question, put that up there.
That is an interesting twist.
It would not be under 608. 608 is ozone depleting substances. This certification would be under the AIM Act, and specifically subsection H of the AIM Act, which directs EPA to ensure technician and end user or consumer safety. So it would be an additional certification under the AIM Act. In order to amend, if you will, 608, it would take congressional act to amend 608.
That's right, because it is under the
Clean Air Act, right? And specifically ozone depleting substances.
Ozone depleting substances. So it is it's an interesting thing to talk about, and we used to hear a lot about that when we first started getting these conversations. Well, could we just add, like a type 4?
Type 4.
Let's.
It sounds like a great idea.
Sounds like a great idea, but how do you do that? How
logistically and legally? Right.
It would take an act of Congress.
Or a legal maneuver of some sort, right?
Exactly. And so if we think about the HFC phase down alone, remember, that was initiated during the Obama administration. Did not get signed by the Obama administration. Did not get signed by the Trump administration. Wasn't until over a year into the Biden administration that it was finally signed. So we could potentially ask for a type 4 and it go for years through administration approval before it finally happened. So likelihood is
under the AIM Act, right?
The AIM Act will be the directive. Man,
Any other questions out there? I know we threw a lot of information at you.
That's right.
There was a whole bunch of numbers up there, and it's GWP. We're moving to lower GWP refrigerants. We're going to see new refrigerants and new equipment, and we have to be ready. And it's coming sooner rather than later. Like I said, we're going to see some of this equipment in the November and December of this year hit some of these supply houses.
Absolutely. So if you want to come back and watch this, head on over to our YouTube channel, ESCO Institute HVAC Excellence. Make sure to subscribe so that you get updates whenever we continue these conversations. Tell all your friends about the channel and this particular topic. Have them to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we want you here with us, and we want all of your friends with us so we can talk about these things together week after week. New topics, top industry professionals diving into the trenches to learn about all this. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
I don't think my brain can take any more, Jason. I'm done for the day.
No, there's some smoke coming out of here.
That's right. Thank you all so much for joining Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show, and we will see you again next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.